Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are breaking down what is arguably the single most destructive conflict in all of human history, World War II. This was a war so huge, so all-encompassing, that it didn't just change the map, it completely redefined the world as we know it. So let's just jump right in with that question, because this isn't some dusty chapter in a history book. The answer is literally all around you. It's in our politics, our technology, our alliances. The legacy of this war is everywhere. And it's pretty wild when you look at it like this. Every single one of these things was forged in the fire of that war. The United Nations, it was created from the ashes with the very specific goal of making sure this never happened again. The old empires of Europe crumbled, which kicked off the decolonization movement. And of course, two new giants rose to dominate the globe, the USA and the USSR, starting the Cold War and ushering in the terrifying nuclear age. To really get how this all happened, we have to rewind the clock. We can't just start in 1939. No, we have to go back to the mess that was left behind by the First World War. Here's the key thing to understand. The end of one war basically planted all the seeds for the next. The Treaty of Versailles, it essentially forced Germany to take all the blame, pay a crushing amount of money in reparations, and lose huge chunks of its territory. That kind of humiliation created this deep, burning resentment, and it was the perfect fuel for extremist leaders like Adolf Hitler to rise to power. And you can just watch the dominoes fall through the 1930s. All these aggressive, expansionist countries were testing the waters, and you know what they found? Nobody was willing to stop them. Japan invades Manchuria, Italy takes Ethiopia, Germany just absorbs Austria, and the world mostly just watched. Each time they got away with it, they got bolder. Until finally, Germany invaded Poland, and that was the last straw. The world was at war. So how did this thing explode from a crisis in Europe into a genuine world war? Well, once the fighting started, it spread like wildfire. The world basically split right down the middle into two massive teams. You had the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, all driven by these aggressive, militaristic, and expansionist ideas. And on the other side, you had the Allies, led by the Big Three, the US, the UK, and the Soviet Union, who formed this huge coalition to fight back. This was more than a war between nations. It was a clash of fundamentally different ideas about how the world should work. And for the first few years, honestly, it looked like the Axis was unstoppable. Germany's Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, just tore through Europe. At the same time, Japan launched its surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, dragging the United States into the fight, and then quickly conquered a massive empire across the Pacific. But then, everything started to shift, and it happened because of two absolutely pivotal battles, thousands of miles apart. In the Pacific, the U.S. Navy won a huge victory at the Battle of Midway, which crippled the Japanese fleet and finally stopped their advance. And on the unbelievably brutal Eastern Front, the Soviet victory at Stalingrad was a complete disaster for the German army. It was the beginning of the end for them, a long, bloody retreat that would end in Berlin. From that point on, the Axis was on the back foot. But winning came at a cost, an unbelievable, unprecedented human cost. The sheer scale of the fighting led to a level of death and destruction that humanity had just never seen before. And the numbers? Well, they're almost impossible to truly comprehend. Think about this number. An estimated 75 million people were killed. But here's what's so staggering. In most wars before this, soldiers made up the majority of casualties. Not this time. The majority were civilians, men, women, and children. This was a war where the line between the battlefield and home simply disappeared. And at the dark heart of that civilian toll was the Holocaust. This wasn't some byproduct of the war. It was a central goal of the Nazi regime. A state-sponsored, industrial-scale genocide. The Nazis and their collaborators systematically murdered 6 million European Jews, alongside millions of others they deemed undesirable. And the war didn't just end. It ended with a flash of light that changed humanity forever. To force Japan's surrender, the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs, completely obliterating the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The nuclear age had begun, and humanity now had the power to destroy itself. The horrors of the Holocaust were so extreme that the world literally had to create a new word for this ultimate crime, genocide. And after the war, at the Nuremberg trials, the world established a crucial new principle that just following orders is not a defense for committing crimes against humanity. So in 1945, after the surrender of Germany and Japan, the world was in ruins. The victors had this monumental task ahead of them, not just to rebuild, but to try and build a whole new world order. And you can see here, the entire global power structure was just completely scrambled. The old European empires like Britain and France were on the winning side, but they were exhausted and basically broke. And rising to take their place were the two new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, Germany and Japan would be occupied and rebuilt from the ground up, with Germany itself literally split in two by the new Cold War. And out of all that devastation came this promise, this idea. To try and avoid repeating the mistakes of the past, the Allies created the United Nations. It was meant to be a place for cooperation, to prevent future conflicts, a promise from the survivors to future generations. And that really brings us right back to today. That generation built institutions and alliances designed to make sure a world war never, ever happened again. But when you look around at the conflicts and the tensions in the world right now, you have to ask yourself a pretty serious question. Is the peace they built strong enough to last?